can't resist giving a little plug while I'm here to a new campaign that we're founding, the Social Economy Alliance, given this is a social economy session. And that's a campaign in the run-up to the 2015 general election it's for organisations that want a more social economy, and a number of housing associations are joining. I'm on the verge of abusing my role of chair. Obviously, I'm not here to talk much. I'm here to frame the debate and to time it and to bring you guys in about 20-25 minutes. You'll have a chance to question our fantastic panel. So to frame the debate, obviously we're living in extraordinary economic times. What we need is an economic recovery that isn't actually a recovery. We're not trying to recover old ground, we're trying to gain new ground. What we need is an economy that is different from the economy that we had before, that doesn't constantly sow the seeds of its own destruction. And an economy where everybody realises that what's bad for society is very rarely, in the long run, good for the economy. To help us along the way with our debate today, we've got a fantastic panel, absolutely wonderful. First of all, on the far end, is Gareth Thomas, who is the Shadow Minister of State for Civil Society. Gareth's held a number of roles in government and in the opposition, both in business and in civil society roles. And I think people who actually understand society, civil society, and the way it works, as well as understanding business and the economy, are very precious, and I think we need to see more of them on the front benches in the future. Chris White, MP, on my left, is MP for Warwick and Leamington, and he was recently appointed as the government's social value ambassador. And rightly so, in his time in Parliament, Chris has been an extraordinary champion of social value. He tabled the bill that is now the Social Value Act, which has been a complete game changer for many organisations, and it's certainly changed the debate, hopefully forever, on what public service procurement and commissioning are for and what they can do. And it's spawning similar legislation in other countries. Naomi, on my right, is the founder and chief executive of the London Rebuilding Society. She's got 2 decades of experience in economic development. She founded and chaired the Community Development Finance Association and has been a great champion for community banking in the UK. And finally, on the very far right, is Paul Doe, Chief Executive of Shepherd's Bush Housing Association, which, if I'm right, has been a bit of a trailblazer, really, in collaborating with other organisations to bring about a stronger social economy in the areas that it's responsible for. So I'm going to ask each of them to speak for a few minutes to each of you, speak to the topic in hand, and then I'm going to hand over to you for questions.
Yes, I am Paul Doe. I'm the Chief Executive of Shepherd's Bush, and you probably heard me ask a question earlier on as the Chair of St Mungo's. And I'm also the Chair of St Mungo's, the homeless charity. I am a social economy booster, I suppose. This session is all about boosting the social economy, and certainly I do regard myself as someone who is a strong supporter of social enterprise and developing social enterprise. My association has been changing the way it operates, I suppose, over the last maybe 13 years. We are still a house builder, just to get that point across. We do still build homes in West London, a very heated environment. But we are also looking at how we build homes as well, in terms of trying to use the homes that we build to support local facilities as well. We are also one of the founder members of the Place Shaper Group, who are one of the sponsors of this event. There are 99 Place Shapers now across the country, and all of them share an ethos about local community investment, working with residents to provide services that local people really want. So I'm not alone. There are many organisations, and I know there are many in this audience as well, who are doing similar things to what Shepherd's Bush has been doing. But I just want to take my few minutes to give you some pointers on what we've done and how we've done it. And probably 13 years ago now, we were just a traditional housing association. We operate in West London. We have about now 5,200 homes that we own and manage. We have a turnover of about £43 million now. And at the present time, around about 15% of that money goes through our own social enterprises or into other social enterprises. So that's quite a lot of money that we're putting in that direction. We started out 13 years ago by bringing a small charity into the group. At the time its name was Staying Put Services for the Elderly, open brackets, Kensington and Chelsea, close brackets. Probably gives you a flavour of the sort of organisation it was. Providing just a little bit of home improvement agency services for very well-to-do ladies, I have to say, in Kensington and Chelsea. That organisation is now called Staying First, and it now has a turnover of £5 million. And included within it is a furniture, recycling and reuse charity that now has something like, I think it's 20 different contracts. And is turning over itself this year probably £3 million. Really exploded into life. The charity also has a large shop that we run with another organisation called Healthy Planet, who recycle books for free, and also with Age UK. As well as the shop, we provide volunteering facilities for people who want to volunteer into work. We do community payback through the organisation, and obviously paid employment as well. And we found actually that we're a bit of a sort of seed bed, and this is what you need to think about as well with some of these social enterprises. We move furniture. Where's the natural place for people to go? Well, they go and become baggage handlers at Heathrow. So it's very interesting actually how we've become a little training ground. We also operate within the group. We want the group to be about ideas, and we will put money into ideas. And we're running a couple of social enterprises within Shepherd's Bush itself, where we've ring-fenced the money, to use the regulation parlance, so that we can see how those organisations are operating and whether we can bring them into profit. We are prepared to live with them for 2 to 3 years without making much money. But what we're interested in is what is the impact in the local community. And we really do think that by doing that, it will make an impact. We also we've set up a training social enterprise called Academy for Housing, with 3 other housing associations who are offering training services to residents and staff, and also an employability programme now across London. And we also support other smaller social enterprises who operate in our area. I'm not sure if Kelly's still here, but Student at Home is one of them, who provide services to support tenants who are offline to get them online, and also a group called Business Launchpad, who mentor young people to set up their own businesses. So for us, it's become, as well as building homes, a very important part of what we do. And I just wanted to run through 4 things that I think are important in terms of driving that ethos. The first one is around passion. All right? We need to use the word passion in your organisation for it. You have to have a passionate chief executive. And my wife says that to me as well. If she can find one, I'm sure she'll let me know. But you have to have people at the top of the organisation who are passionate about driving this sort of agenda, because it has its downs as well as its ups. You need a corporate will going through the organisation so that people know if mistakes are made, no one's going to get clobbered. You've tried to make a difference. And I've developed a passion for this. I developed a passion not just for housing, but for also realising that I needed to do more than just provide bricks and mortar. For me, it came out of being a student living in the Hume Fives in Manchester. They've all been demolished now, but at the time we used to have a piece of wood with a bar of soap on the end to catch the cockroaches. You know, just dab them on the back and then you can pop them into a jar. Lots of people nodding already still. Sometimes we drop them into the flat below through the concrete holes in the floor. But anyway, I knew then, living in a place like that, I had to do something over and above just provide good housing, and that stuck with me. And to be honest, I went out and found a vehicle and a board that were prepared to go with that vision. So you need to find that. The other thing you need to do, the second thing, is put money at risk. All right? We are housing associations. We do have money. I think the corporate accounts showed something like £2 billion of surplus. Now, I know much of that is there to support new house building in the future, and certainly I'm using a lot of mine to support new house building. But hey, we can put some of that money at risk. We can try new things. All right, that's what we do. We recently have invested £100,000 in Academy for Housing. We're putting £250,000 into something called our Umbrella Team to provide services for older people in the community. We're testing it. So we are prepared to do that. And my board are signed up for it because they share that passion. The third thing is the right people. I'm a great believer in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. If there's one thing to write down, that's the book. Right. Good to Great, all about getting the right people on the bus, just turning the wheel, off we go. If you can find the right people, and sometimes they're nothing to do with housing, I have to say, they can come from anywhere, but the right people will come into your business, take an opportunity and move it on. Now, you do need inspirational champions who are prepared to say, I'll take that personal risk if you run alongside me. So I have some of the right people, I'm constantly trying to find more of the right people. Very important to me. Fourth thing is buying and selling. I spent 17 years in local government before I joined housing associations. I never had to sell anything, really. I was a buyer. But I realised when I joined a housing association, you both buy and sell. You have to sell yourself. Now, we as an organisation buy from our social enterprises. You have to give it that boost. And many of you perhaps should go back and have a look at the top 10 suppliers to your organisations. And if a social enterprise is in the top 2, ask the question, why? All right? Because certainly for me it is. We buy a lot of services from our social enterprises. And also then, you sell them as well. So everywhere I go, whenever I'm talking to anybody, I try and sell the services that Staying First and Shepherd's Bush have to offer, that Academy for Housing have to offer. Because they're good services, I believe in them. And we're not extracting a huge amount of profit out of them. We are basically happy to operate on very low margins, but also worry more about the social return on that investment as well, and the impact that we have in the local community. So I would say to people who are thinking about this, and I realise that perhaps the audience here are more of the converted than the unconverted, but for those of you who are thinking about it, stop thinking and get on and do it. Thank you very much.
A little bit more whisk to the front if that's possible. And I hope you will get access to water too, because 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock on a one-day conference, it's the graveyard slot. Frankly, if the panel are awake, you're lucky. If any of the audience stay awake by the end of the hour, frankly, that will be a remarkable achievement for the 4 of us. So water, I think, is essential to try and stack the odds a little bit more in our favour on that score. What's the future for the social economy? I think it boils down to where the finance for the social economy is going to come from after 2015, which is what I'm focused on. I think there's a number of potential sources of finance. Clearly, there will still be some government financial support, though dramatically less than one might have hoped 3 or 4 years ago. So where's the new sources of social finance to drive the economy going to come from if we can't rely perhaps on government finance in the way that we might have done in the past? I think it's going to be new sources of finance driven by legislation. And one of the sources of finance that I think whose time has finally come is social finance through an American piece of legislation which I think could be imparted into the UK, called the Community Reinvestment Act. And that essentially has 3 elements to it, which many of you I suspect will be familiar with. One is disclosure. It forces the banks and other financial services companies to disclose what they lend, where they lend and how they lend it, down to community level, even right down to postcode level. It places an obligation on those financial services companies to lend into every community, and if they're not willing to do it themselves for business reasons or whatever, to lend via intermediaries, be they, as in the US, be they housing associations, be they CDFIs or community banks, be they credit unions, or be they other forms of third sector organisations. And then the third element is the sticks. In the US, it's the bad rating that follows if you're not seen to be a good performer in terms of lending into every community. It stops you getting licenses in the next door state to expand your operations. And what it's done in the US, that piece of legislation, is to help drive a huge injection of what is effectively private finance into social purposes, particularly in areas of deprivation, but in a whole series of other areas too. Into housing developments, into enterprise creation, into a variety of third sector providers, be they, as I say, credit unions or community banks, housing associations, etc. Where might the other potential sources of social finance come from? Well, I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, whether now is the time for us to look at a levy on undeveloped land, a version of the land value tax. It's been floated a number of times in the past. It's always met with substantial Treasury opposition under this government and indeed under the previous government. I have to say I don't know whether it is the right course of action, so any central office spies checking for a new Labour Party announcement, just note that. I haven't reached a view on that. But I do think that is the classic piece of territory for the housing association movement actually to do some research on, to look at the pros and cons of that particular aspect of the land value tax debate, to see whether it would generate and whether it would be appropriate, an appropriate source of finance to fund new house building. Lastly, I wanted to pick up where Paul left off on this question of the supply chain for housing associations. I think there is a debate still running around what is the nature of responsible capitalism in the UK and more generally. And I think that is a question that's clearly appropriate to pose to big business, but it's surely also appropriate to pose it to social enterprises, and in the context of this particular session, to housing associations. I think if housing associations want to continue to have the right to build in our communities, then they need to continue to demonstrate value for money, and we need to be able to measure the performance of one housing association against another. I think we need to understand perhaps what the pay ratios are. What's the person who's getting the highest salary on compared to the person who's on the lowest salary? What are the levels of tax that are paid? How many middle class jobs, the £25,000 to £60,000 jobs, are actually being created by the organisation? And then perhaps how many people are on the living wage, or how many apprenticeships are being created. I think there is a time now when we should be looking at how do we redesign the compacts between housing associations and the communities in which those housing associations want to operate. And my very last point, I suppose, is this, is that I think it's great that ResPublica are organising this debate. As someone who's been the Minister for the Shadow Minister for the Third Sector for getting on for almost 2 years now, I'm struck actually by how little contact I have had with the housing association movement in the UK. And I think that's partly my fault, but I think it's also partly, if I may say so, the housing association movement's fault too, because I am struck by how unvisible on occasion the housing association movement is. And if there's ever a case for investment in ideas, let me throw back to Paul, I think it's investment in political ideas, in new ideas about the direction of travel for the future of housing associations. And I think it's contribution to the political debate about where the money for housing development is going to come from in the future, that I think it's now time for housing associations to be much more active on. And in that sense, I welcome the opportunity to come along and to ask that gentle, but I hope provocative question through ResPublica. Thanks very much.
So relieved, but also slightly left speechless, because Paul has partly covered what I was going to cover, and Gareth has very kindly covered one of my obsessions, which is the Community Reinvestment Act, which he knows is one of my obsessions. So on that basis, I'm going to kind of jump what I was going to say and maybe go back to basics about social enterprise and finance and the challenges for social enterprise. It might be worth just introducing London Rebuilding Society to you, because most of you will not, I suspect, sadly, know who we are, despite the fact that we've been in existence for 13 years. We are a social enterprise. We're one of that breed of organisations mentioned by Gareth. We're a community finance institution. I set the organisation up, and my preoccupation was to be able to provide finance where the mainstream traditional doesn't operate. So and also to always try and develop new ways of doing finance. So maybe that's why I've been asked to talk about this. We innovate. We identify a need in the community. We look and see what's out there, and then we think that doesn't work very well, let's come up with a better way of doing it. And so we provide not just finance, but a whole range of services that are attached to that. But the core of it is a financial mechanism. It may be one that's got to be reshaped, that exists. It may be a traditional mechanism, but we will always change it slightly, mostly because of the additional services that we provide to social enterprises and other individuals. So our finance isn't just for social enterprise and business. It's also, we're providing community-based microfinance. Predominantly at the moment, we actually provide domestic finance, so home improvements for elderly and vulnerable homeowners, finance for empty homes, and green finance. And we've developed a new product, and we're not frightened to use technology alongside finance to deliver new services. So back to basics on social enterprise. I was actually asked also to talk a little bit about small businesses, and I'll do that very briefly. I mean, I think the key to all of this is that we need to understand the role of business in the social economy, business in general. Business has a very key role. It is about a load of things that sometimes we know and sometimes we don't think about. Obviously, it can create jobs. Obviously, it provides services, it may provide product in some instances. What it does do very often, as a small business, often providing services in that community. So very frequently we're talking hairdressers, window cleaners, shops, lots of things that we need on an everyday basis. And as it's a local small business, very frequently, it also is helping with money flows in that community. So not only is it providing service, jobs, etc. in the community, in the social economy in fact, but it's also helping money to stay within that community and being more effective, which in itself will increase people's access to finance in those areas. In regard to social enterprise, it's essentially the same, that social enterprise, especially now, as social enterprise mushrooms, particularly young people, are all setting up businesses as social enterprises. What we are now seeing is a whole range, a plethora of different sorts of organisations, but the core, the traditional element of social enterprise is to look at what's needed in your community, to form a group of people, possibly one single social entrepreneur, and go out and think and try and find a way of delivering that service better to meet the needs of your economy, of your social, of your community, and to, again, that will provide jobs, it could provide training, it will provide services, and it does the same thing of helping income flows within the economy. So overall, it will boost the social economy. However, for social enterprises, they still, for some people, remain strange beasts. Certainly the traditional finance sector banks still have trouble with a social enterprise. Indeed, they have trouble with social businesses, with small businesses, but particularly with the social enterprise, because a social enterprise is not particularly finance oriented. It's not obsessed with making a product, has a double or a triple bottom line. They have all sorts of weird structures. You've got mutuals, you've got guarantee companies, you've got all sorts of stuff. They may not be very familiar to the traditional banking sector, which incidentally no longer has the traditional banker in it, who might have understood this kind of community-based organisation, or indeed a small business. The organisations themselves suffer from a whole range of things. Unless they've got a wonderful pal, like Paul's housing association that supports them, they're really very much on their own. They will not very often have the right kind of skills. They will have the passion, the energy and the desire to do something, often one people, sometimes a group. But generally, they will not have finance skills, they will not have marketing skills, they will not have any money, for sure. And that's pretty tough to deliver anything without any money. Their social enterprises have emerged out of the voluntary sector, pretty much, or the cooperative sector. So a lot of them still think first about getting their money through grants. Now, that might be wonderful if you've got the kind of activity that Sarah from Popular Harker talked about, where you've got a community budget that might choose to focus on something like this, or if you happen to be in the area of health and that's their focus. But otherwise now, there's pretty much nowhere you can go to get any kind of grant if you're a new social enterprise. You might pick up local authority contracts, but without a track record, forget it. You're unlikely to be able to do that. It's very difficult for many social entrepreneurs or social enterprises to understand the skills they have to gather around them, I think, because they're so driven to just go out and do their thing. I mean, I guess I'm a social entrepreneur myself, but luckily I was quite old when I started and I'd done all sorts of stuff. And I knew I only had some of the skills. So as Paul said, I had to pull in a group of people complementing my skills. I could not have set up London Rebuilding Society, which has sustained itself for 13 years and is about to take a leap and be a much bigger organisation on my own. But I don't think that many social entrepreneurs still quite get that. And it worries me, especially with a lot of young people coming in who don't maybe realise that on their own they can't do everything. And in a sense that leads me to where I think there's innovation potentially in finance for social enterprise and social entrepreneurs. If you can form a community, if you can form a cooperative, if you can create that kind of mechanism, then you will be able to bring in the kind of skills that you need. That's fundamental. What you can also do is set yourself up as a very old-fashioned thing, which many housing associations are, indeed London Rebuilding Society is, an industrial and provident society. I know Philip's very keen on industrial and provident societies. An ancient beast, but a really great structure if you want to run a social enterprise or a community-based activity, whether it's solar, wind farms, local shop. As you know, many more shops are being taken over by their community, because with that structure, you can issue shares. You can do a community share issue. Now, this is a really great way of raising finance, because you get your community in your local economy to all contribute. You can buy 10 shares of £1. But essentially, you club together money, so it's nothing new, and that becomes your core finance in order to get started. And quite often, you can generate more and more income that way, because as you do well, more and more people want to buy shares. So it's an extremely exciting, actually, way of raising finance. It's a very cooperative social enterprise way of doing it, and it will bring with it lots and lots of other skills, because you'll get people buying shares. You might get the local bank manager thinking, oh, I'll buy some shares in that, and then the local bank manager might think, when this organisation says, actually we're struggling a bit, might think, well, maybe I can find a way of helping them, because currently the local bank manager is unlikely to do that. Organisations with no capital can't secure against assets, a whole range of things. You've got to find new ways of doing it. The other ways of getting financed are through organisations like LRS, London Rebuilding Society, where we don't currently actually, but we have over many years provided finance for social enterprises, very flexible loans, meeting their particular needs, and packaged up with business support, advice, pre and after care. So we're there for the social enterprise when they're struggling away and possibly starting to have a problem with their finance. We will also advise them on the skills that they may require, and we offer quite a lot of training. We still do that.
Naomi, I'm just
about to finish. Yeah. And the final area, of course, is still there are credit unions that are looking to provide finance for social enterprises and businesses in general. And the big one, which will make the biggest difference of all, is the Community Reinvestment Act. So I think if we really need people to come on board to campaign for that kind of change. It needs legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's very difficult to be the last speaker amongst so much agreement, but notwithstanding, I'd like to start with just a couple of brief thank yous. It's good to see Philip staring from the audience, frightening us all from his sedentary position, but he's followed certainly my work through Parliament, has been incredibly supportive, as has Social Enterprise UK, ResPublica, of course, and the other the players that really have made this act quite mainstream. When I joined Parliament in 2010, I'd only just found out where my office and the toilets were when I was presented with the opportunity to put forward a private member's bill. And notwithstanding everything that goes on in the House of Commons, it's only with the support of people like Gareth, Hazel Blears and Nick Hurd, of course, cross-party support that actually made this, or the Social Value Act, a bill that we could actually use and move forward and develop the sector. When I started, and building on, standing on giant shoulders or whatever, but when I started there was a little evidence that there was an understanding of what was going on. The profile of the sector was quite low. What we have seen in the last 3 years is through the help of organisations across the country, a real feeling that the time has come for this to have an enormous difference in the way that we are as a society, we're a social economy, the way that we have our economy and the way we rebalance our economy as a whole. My job is not to wait to 2015 for the general election. It is to make sure that we have movement now, to make sure that we promote what is working well, which is why I would ask the housing associations who have worked tremendously effectively in terms of social enterprises to let us know what is working, what's good, what are the barriers, where we can help, where you can see that nudge, that piece of legislation, make a difference that would make your existences and your potential grow to a greater degree. I think the issue today is about innovation and investment. I'd just like to run through some of the ways that I can see taking shape, things that we could see as potential for making the Treasury, for example, look at ways for improvement. I think, as I say, we've seen in terms of the Social Enterprise UK's report, the State of the Sector survey, access to finance is the biggest problem. I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we are able to rapidly expand the market. We need to ensure there's sufficient credit around, credit is flowing, so that we can reduce the interest rates and make sensible borrowing by social enterprises much more readily available. I saw only last night that the Co-op Bank is introducing a social enterprise account with something around £100,000 worth of transactions, £5,000 worth of cheques passing across the bank would be free to this account. So yet again, there's some positive movement in this direction. I think we need to set up things like a social investment ISA, another opportunity where people could look at things in a different model. I think we need to look at much more of the retail investment side. I think we shouldn't be predominantly relying on banks and the more traditional forms of finance, but without the profile of the sector rising, without the finance there to support this rise, I think it will take far longer to grow than the opportunity in front of us leads. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it would be much more appropriate in the last dying embers of the graveyard shift to give you the opportunity.
It's been a great session.
to give you the opportunity to ask questions. So I'll move away now, and I think it's up to.
Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left, so start your questions now. Do we have a roving mic or?
Elliot, where's the mic? Thank you.
Gentleman in the front row.
Could I thank Naomi for mentioning small business? Although I am a clergyman, I am also the chair of Merton Chamber of Commerce. None of you know where that is. I live in Wimbledon. Now you know where I live and where Merton is. We're the largest Borough-based business support agency in London. And amongst the things we do, we have a social enterprise champion on our board. We manage a business incubator which includes social enterprises alongside small business, and we employ a business engagement manager who specifically works in partnership with the voluntary sector to create linkage between local small business who want to contribute to their community and the needs of the community. So there are some really innovative bits of work out there. It's important that we don't see business as the enemy. We can be your friend.
Absolutely. Any questions? Philip, I think.
Very excited and struck by Gareth's quick 5 policy points that we need to drive finance. I love the idea of, depends how you look at it, of rewarding social housing when it's social and thereby in effect penalising when it's not. I think that's right. But can I ask, outside of legislative kind of renewal, if you ask providers kind of what's most needed, they often say making it mainstream so people know it's a mainstream option. And I think a social value ISA is fantastic. But what can we do with small businesses? I'm thinking of LEPs. I'm thinking of people who are normally, especially in our deprived areas, to encourage them to set up and start small businesses and start small enterprises. And what does the panel feel the role of housing associations is in this? Yes, they have to abide by the Social Value Act, but what do the panel feel that they should be involved in time to actually do business startup and educating people to start up and realise that their problems, because the government pays for them, are an asset. So that any problem that the government pays for is an asset, and teaching them to use and, in a sense, create a private sector out of the public sector. And I'd just be really interested as to what the panel thought should be the modes of incentive and encouragement in that regard.
Can I ask Paul to lead off on this one, because I think he had the most to say about it?
Thank you, yeah. I don't want to fall into the trap of believing that housing associations have the answer to everything on this. And we are a very proud supporter of an organisation called Business Launchpad, which does just that. It encourages 18 to 30-year-olds with ideas, because there's loads of ideas out there, to be mentored into developing those ideas and turning them into businesses. My support for that organisation is to provide them with free accommodation, and then I get out of the way. Actually, that's what they need. They need something to underpin the way in which they work so that they can develop their own business, and then me step back. What I also seek to do, for my investment of course, is provide them with young people who would like to participate in Business Launchpad's work. But I don't think I can do everything. What we've chosen to do in the Shepherd's Bush group is focus on certain gaps where we felt that we could best serve our residents and other residents in the local area. But where other things are going on that are being well served, just support those businesses with what they need, those little enterprises with what they need, and then get out of their way, because they will flourish.
Just a couple of things. Is that working? Yep. Yeah. I think that, like any large organisation, which most housing associations are not large necessarily, but they're substantial, any of them are in a position to think about their role in relation to supporting business. It might be just purchasing from small businesses. One of the things that can really help, many years ago when I was in the local authority, this was one of the areas that we tried very hard to work on. There was a lot of resistance. It may be something that will come out of the Social Value Act. There is also, obviously, all the things that Paul's mentioned, but I think also providing expertise. And if you can think about pooling people within the housing association that may be available for the small businesses, social enterprises, not necessarily as volunteers, but actually to go through with them when they first start and scrutinise their ideas. Because what scares me most is that people who set up social businesses and social enterprises often are not setting up something that's going to work and is viable. So that first end stuff, and I think there's a lot of skills in housing associations where that could be helped, not just housing associations, and a number of organisations in any community.
Thank you. Yes, it is fortuitous that I wrote to just yesterday the Minister about what LEPs were doing in terms of social enterprise, and also my Warwickshire, Coventry and Warwickshire chair of the local enterprise to say, what's he doing as well? I think the problem is the recognition. Again, we go back to the problem with the profile. When the LEPs were set up, they were, that was the direction they were travelling. Now here is something else coming from, from the offside, very quickly gaining momentum that they need to understand and pick up and engage with. But I think it's another facet as well. It's making sure that the LEPs are all very aware of the Federation of Small Businesses and SMEs and UKTI. There is also the big, the social enterprise sector that can underpin all those different organisations. I think looking at our education system, talking about our local colleges, where they have a whole curriculum designed towards entrepreneurship, and this is all very much part of it. So, as I said in my remarks, this is something that the time has very much come to look at it far more deeply. I think there needs to be some shocks, some door knocking on these different organisations, say, be aware of this. You need to be there very much at the middle, not when it's too late to be very much at the part of setting up these things and how to make things work, certainly in terms of the local enterprise partnership.
I don't disagree with anything that I've heard so far, but I think of a structural problem that it seems to me exists in not just one place in the UK, but in a number of places, and it's not Wimbledon, but it's Thamesmead, so also in South London. And Thamesmead's a community of about 55,000 people that doesn't have one single bank branch within a 35 to 45 minute bus journey away. Now that's obviously causes immense difficulties on occasion for the individuals. But if you want to set up a business as well, it's very difficult to find anybody nearby within your community who has a sense of the challenges that your business is going to face to discuss taking a loan out with. And Thamesmead is not an isolated example in the UK. A series of communities like that across the UK. And we have to do something about that structural problem of a lack of access to lending and capital. So your small business has access to the capital it needs to expand. And that's where the point I made, I suppose, at the beginning about the Community Reinvestment Act and the disclosures that we need banks and financial services companies to sign up to will be helpful so that we know where those lending deserts are and we could do something about them. I come back to by way of second point, just to this issue about perhaps the need for a new compact between housing associations and the communities in which housing associations want to build it. What is the nature of that compact? Now, to be provocative, I threw out some controversial thoughts that people have put to me. Perhaps it is about what housing associations can do to support new businesses, young people setting up. I don't know, but I do believe that there is a need to redefine the relationship as housing associations have to change to the circumstances that they're in, and business more generally has to rebuild its relationship with us as consumers. What's the nature of that rebuilt relationship? Well, perhaps in the case of the housing association, it is something to do, as Paul alluded to his work with 18 to 30-year-olds to get them interested into business. I don't know for certain, but I think we need to have that debate.
Innovators in the room.
Yes.
You know,
Almost every housing association that's here is doing wonderful work.
Yes.
But this is not the majority. You know, this is the interesting thing. There's the majority out there that just think this is all rubbish and think that actually their role is to build homes and kind of regard this with increasing irritation. The interesting question is how do we make this the norm? How do we make kind of the converted into people who can convert? That's the question for us. And I think what Gareth opens up is a future prospect where, you know, a Labour government may legislate for it. And I think what we're seeing here, we saw from Nick Hurd this morning and heard from Chris White, is we want to mainstream this as the new norm for housing associations. But I guess it's an open question to all colleagues here. What can we do to mainstream this? Because if it's not mainstreamed, I agree with Gareth, there will and there should be legislation.
Thank you.
Pam Brown, Swan Foundation. I think in terms of mainstreaming, even amongst those of us who are already committed to this model, you can find 4, 5, 6, maybe more housing associations all operating in the same geographical area, and they do not talk to each other, they're competitive with each other, and inevitably, because you've got regen going on, and people are in competition, but actually, if we could model better co-working with other housing associations who are of like mind and show that actually we can leverage that up to produce and deliver something really good, then that might become a model for some of the bigger ones who actually act as accountants, building houses as opposed to delivering any sort of social value.
Great answer. The gentleman here in Stripeship?
Yeah, Andrew Bendel from Hacks. I think there's probably more housing associations doing stuff out there than we know. I like the diversity of the sector. I think the sector should be diverse. I think there's going to be those who are the lead, those who are going to be in the shadows. There's huge organisations, there's tiny organisations. I think what we need is a new narrative about social value in the sector. We had a conversation this morning about should housing associations be splitting out the building function from the housing management function, from the community investment function. No. What we should be doing is we should be using a narrative of social value to describe all of that work within a social value narrative. Because all of that creates social value. The question we need to put on the table is how can we create more social value? How can we make different decisions around the asset base of the organisations, around their spending powers, that creates even more social value in communities that they're operating in? That, for me, is a much more exciting future for housing associations than trying to deal with or come forward with structural changes in a sector that probably doesn't need any more structural changes, but needs a whole new paradigm to understand itself within. And
I think a lot of people in social enterprise would say the beauty of the Act. We often have people asking, what does it mean? How do you define it? How, is it going to have any more teeth in the future? The beauty of the Social Value Act is that it's been an enabler to let the organisations that are already working in this way, to give them more of a green light to do so and to champion it openly. And that's why it's been really helpful, but I agree totally. I think that we have to, as a sector, write the next chapter with Chris and with parliamentarians on social value, absolutely. Do we have one more question? Yes, man over here in the white shirt.
Thank you. Just one really flippant remark. I absolutely support the Community Reinvestment Act, but haven't we got 2 nationalised banks already?
Any final comment, Philip?
a good point on which to end.
A good point on which to end. Thank you all very much. Please enjoy the rest of the sunshine. Thank you.